Something happened at Broncos' mandatory minicamp that could have much bigger implications than people realize, and honestly, the more details that continue to emerge, the more questions it creates about where this team is heading over the next few weeks. Because while everyone was excited to see football back on the field, another storyline quietly stole a lot of attention. A storyline involving one of the Broncos' most important defensive players. A storyline involving uncertainty. And a storyline that may force Denver's front office to make a major decision sooner rather than later. At the same time, there was also plenty of good news. Bo Nix was back on the field. His arm looked sharp. His confidence looked strong. And perhaps most importantly, there were no signs that his recovery is slowing him down as the Broncos continue preparing for the season. But that's only part of the story. Because while QB1 was giving fans reasons to feel optimistic, another quarterback unexpectedly entered the conversation. A player many fans may not know. A player the Broncos decided to bring in for a workout. And a player who some evaluators believe has far more potential than people realize. Then there were the practice highlights. Big plays, defensive plays, explosive moments, and one touchdown that had people talking immediately. The overall message coming out of minicamp was impossible to ignore. This team looks focused. This team looks hungry. And this team appears determined to build on everything it accomplished last season. But there's still one giant question hanging over the entire roster. And until that question is answered, Broncos country is going to keep wondering what happens next. Before we dive into all the details, make sure you've already hit the like button if you believe the Broncos are capable of something special this season. And I want every optimistic Broncos fan watching right now to comment, "Go Broncos! Our best football is still ahead." Personally, I think this is one of the most important weeks of the entire offseason. Not because games are being played, but because we're finally getting real information. We're seeing players move. We're hearing coaches speak. We're learning who is healthy, who is developing, and which areas of the roster might still need attention. In my opinion, the biggest takeaway so far is that there are plenty of reasons for optimism, but there are also a few situations that the Broncos simply cannot afford to ignore. The biggest piece of good news coming out of minicamp revolves around Bo Nix. And honestly, if you're a Broncos fan, this is exactly what you wanted to hear. According to the discussion, Nix made it very clear that if the Broncos needed him to play right now, he would be ready to go. More importantly, he indicated that the ankle is feeling great and that doctors have told him everything looks as good as new. That's a massive development considering how many questions existed following the procedure earlier in the offseason. What stood out most wasn't simply that he was participating. It was how he looked. The report repeatedly emphasized that his arm strength appeared completely normal. No rust, no hesitation, no signs of a quarterback who had spent months recovering. In fact, the impression coming out of practice was that Nix looked sharp, comfortable, and confident throwing the football. That's important, because quarterbacks don't just return physically. They need to return mentally. They need confidence in their mechanics, confidence in their movement, confidence in their ability to make every throw. And based on everything being discussed, Nix appears to be operating with exactly that level of confidence. Another interesting detail involved his comments about Davis Webb. According to the discussion, Nix spoke highly of Webb and even suggested that he believes Webb has a future as a head coach someday. That might sound like a small comment, but it speaks volumes about the respect that exists between quarterback and coordinator. And when quarterbacks trust the people calling plays, good things usually happen. That relationship matters. Communication matters. Chemistry matters, especially when an offense is continuing to evolve. But while Bo Nix generated plenty of positive headlines, another quarterback unexpectedly entered the conversation. Sawyer Robertson. According to the report, the Broncos brought the former Baylor quarterback in for a workout, and the discussion around him was fascinating. Robertson was described as a player with intriguing traits, including pocket presence, size, toughness, and the ability to stand in and deliver throws under pressure. Now, the discussion also pointed out that Robertson remains a developmental prospect. There are areas that need improvement. There are aspects of his game that still require refinement. But that's exactly why these workouts matter. The Broncos are constantly evaluating talent, constantly looking for developmental players, constantly searching for future contributors. And sometimes those evaluations lead to opportunities. Personally, I think that's one of the most underrated aspects of successful organizations. They're never satisfied. They're never finished evaluating. They're always searching for the next player who might surprise people. And that's exactly what these off-season workouts are all about. Then we arrive at the biggest storyline of the entire report. Jonathan Cooper. Because according to the discussion, Cooper was absent from mandatory minicamp after being excused by the team. And whether fans want to admit it or not, that immediately raises questions about what happens next. The report emphasized comments from Sean Payton regarding the standards expected within the organization, while also revisiting the concerns surrounding Cooper's situation. The overall takeaway was simple. Uncertainty remains. And until there is clarity, speculation will continue. What makes this particularly significant is that edge rusher is not a position where teams can afford to be unprepared. If there is uncertainty, contingency plans become important. If there are questions, organizations start evaluating alternatives. And according to the discussion, that possibility may become increasingly relevant as training camp approaches. That's why this story feels bigger than one player's absence. It's about roster planning. It's about preparation. And it's about how the Broncos choose to respond if further action becomes necessary. And that's exactly why the Jonathan Cooper situation may become one of the defining stories of the Broncos offseason. Because according to the discussion, this is no longer simply about missing a practice. This is about what comes next. This is about whether the Broncos believe they have enough certainty at the position to move forward without making another addition. And honestly, based on everything being discussed, that question is becoming more important by the day. The report specifically highlighted the growing belief that Denver may need to seriously consider adding another edge rusher if Cooper's situation remains unresolved. Not because the Broncos suddenly lack talent. Not because the room is weak, but because depth matters. And championship caliber teams don't leave critical positions exposed if they can avoid it. Think about it from the organization's perspective. Training camp is approaching. The defensive system is already being installed. Players are building chemistry. Roles are being defined. The last thing any coaching staff wants is uncertainty at a premium position without a backup plan in place. That's why the discussion began exploring potential solutions. The report mentioned veteran options and even floated the possibility that Denver could become aggressive if the situation demands it. More importantly, the underlying message was clear: waiting forever is not a strategy. At some point, decisions must be made. Personally, I think that's the biggest takeaway from this entire conversation. The Broncos appear focused on preparation. Preparation for the season. Preparation for injuries. Preparation for unexpected developments. And preparation for situations that may force difficult decisions. Good organizations don't react after problems arrive. They prepare before they arrive. But while that storyline continues developing, minicamp also provided several encouraging moments that should have Broncos fans excited. According to the report, Adam Prentice delivered one of the biggest plays of practice with a long touchdown that immediately caught attention. Those are the types of moments coaches love seeing this time of year because they create energy, excitement, and momentum throughout the team. There was also positive discussion surrounding Matt Henningsen's return after missing significant time previously. Seeing players return and make impactful plays is always encouraging, especially during offseason work when teams are trying to establish rhythm and continuity. Another detail that stood out involved the overall sharp